Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday to you. Unless, of course, you may be in Australia, in which case it may already be Monday. At any rate, welcome to tea, and hope you all have something nice to drink with you, where you can settle in. And whenever you come to something like this, satsang with myself or anybody else, anytime you're giving attention to your spiritual life, give it all your attention. We live in such a distracted time that, it's easy to be sitting here at your computer and watching me, because most of you are, or on your phone, which is also where you get all your messages and do emails and work and all sorts of things. So there's kind of a tendency for things to meld together. So try to turn off notifications. Really dedicate yourself to this time of self-exploration. Be consciously focused, concentrating, as it were, which is a related word to conscious. The subject I chose today, well, it chose me really, was consciousness as the substance of the universe. When I talk about consciousness, and I talk about it a lot, but haven't a lot lately, I've been focusing on helping people, on goals, improving life, of removing various obstacles, and on the causes of suffering. But the ultimate answer to the question of suffering is the discovery of who you actually are. Consciousness can become kind of abstract, to become a word that we can talk about it, like we're talking about some metaphysical theory or some special state, or even some object, like a car or a cup or something. But consciousness is what's hearing my words right now. Your experience of consciousness is not abstract. It's very much in this present moment. You're hearing my words. That's consciousness. You are conscious of everything that you're feeling. The clothes against your skin, your butt in the chair or on the couch, the relative warmth or coolness in the room, the sound of my voice, the content of the words, the images on the screen in front of you. They're all being perceived by consciousness. Everything that comes up. You couldn't even say something came up unless consciousness was there to receive it. It's there whether there's content or not. And since this consciousness in which all of this is arising, right, is being perceived by you, they have to be one and the same. Consciousness is not an attribute of you. Right? Because in order for there to be an attribute, it would be something that arose, something that would be perceived. And then you'd have to ask, well, what is perceiving that? The ultimate perceiver is always this thing we call consciousness. I say it's this thing we call consciousness, because what is it? What actually is it? Everything you experience in your life, whatever arises in your experience, be it happiness or sadness, be it joy or grief, be it fame or defamation, be it wins or losses, good or evil, all of it arises and is received by whatever that is. For a moment, let's not even call it consciousness, just whatever that is. Now, whatever that is has to be you. Simple as that. You can't be something else. because you'd have to be something perceiving that something else, and there you'd be again. So coming to see consciousness not as an attribute, not as a character, not as a result of something else, but the actual essence and foundation and ground of your experience, brings it home to this point of cognition that is your experience every single day. Now, what's important about that, what's important to explore about that is whatever arises in consciousness and comes and goes, right? Whatever it might be, is it consciousness itself that has the suffering or the enjoyment? Is suffering inherent in consciousness itself? Is consciousness suffering? Or is the suffering simply another thing that is appearing in consciousness? The answer to that question is the end of suffering. Now, if I am in a relationship with what's arising in my experience, in some kind of a attached way, I want to have more of that, or in some adverse way, like I don't want any more of that, I'm in this state of fighting with what is arising. Now, is consciousness fighting with what's arising? Or is the resistance to what's happening or the attachment to what's happening something else that's arisen? This is something that really needs to be pondered, because if what I'm intimating is true, it means that there's a very clear and very short distance to the end of suffering. If consciousness does not suffer, it simply experiences whatever arises, then you don't suffer. If you are consciousness, then it is not you that is suffering. I have to imagine myself to be somebody who has certain attributes and characteristics, likes and dislikes, various kinds of conditions and situations in my life. If I imagine myself to be that, then I will be in some kind of a conflicted relationship with what's happening. I'll be taking a position. I'll like this, I won't like that. But if we look really carefully, we see what makes up that person who is resisting or attaching. Isn't that also just a bunch of various kinds of attributes that are arising in consciousness? And then there's this thought that says there's a self there, there's a person there. Isn't that actually what's happening? You know, you can light a fire and the space won't burn. It's completely unaffected by it. This is why traditionally they've always used the metaphor of space for consciousness, for that empty, vast spaciousness in which anything can happen. And yet the space itself remains completely untouched. Now, given that, it's not the end of the story. Because while suffering can end through the shift of identification from what is appearing in consciousness to the consciousness in which it's appearing, there's no more person to suffer or enjoy. There's just suffering and enjoyment going on, or you might say pain and pleasure going on. But you will not be engaged or attached or stuck in it, or be the one suffering. In which case, suffering simply ceases to exist. But everything's still arising. That hasn't stopped. Experiences still happen. Birds keep singing. People still fall in love. The world appears to go on and on and on and on. But now it becomes, the question goes from who am I to what is this? If you know who you are, if you grasp who you are, as does Lulu, the next step is, well, then what is this? What is this? Look around. See, we have all these assumptions about what the world is, and the trees I'm looking at outside here, and the computer, and this cat that's suddenly interested in being around here. We have all sorts of ideas as to what they are, but suddenly it's like, well, wait a minute. When I look at it through the eyes of consciousness, what am I experiencing? Does consciousness ever experience anything other than consciousness? Are the things that are arising in consciousness also consciousness? It's the question to ponder. What is the nature of experience? And this is where it moves from simply the desire for enlightenment, which is the disidentification, recognizing you are consciousness, to the deeper desire for wisdom and compassion. To not simply get away from everything, but to subsume everything into that oneness. How can it be one and many at the same time? Well, a hint would be your dreams at night. The dream you have at night is what is it? Where does it exist? How substantial is it? Real experiences, sometimes really nice experiences, sometimes not so nice. Yet what are they? What is it made of? You have a conversation with somebody, you go somewhere, you hang out, you're looking at mountains and scenes and skies. And yet, none of it exists independently from you. It's nothing but mind, nothing but consciousness. Consciousness is not localized. There isn't my consciousness here and your consciousness there. If that was the case, then it would be, you could divide it all up, and this would have a consciousness and that have a consciousness. Nor is it panpsychism, which is the idea that the universe as a whole has become conscious. What if consciousness was the very substance of the universe, that everything was made out of it? And like your dreams at night, which have the appearance of existing, but don't have independent objective existence. This is what Buddha meant when he said it both exists and does not exist. Your dreams exist. I can talk about them. This wonderful dream. At the same time, it doesn't exist. That means it has no actual objective existence. It is not real in that sense. It is only an appearance. An appearance of what? An appearance of mind. It is simply mind knowing itself. And in this instance, I can use mind and consciousness synonymously, because they just fold into each other. Think of mind as simply the creative aspect of consciousness. This intelligence, this creativity, this love, this infinite love, doesn't pervade all space. It creates space itself. It is beyond even space. You can't say it has any dimensions. Where is the boundary of consciousness? It's like asking, what is the boundary of space? It's interesting that our universe, we speak of our universe as simply all the stuff, right? And that it's expanding. Isn't it kind of curious that no matter how much it expands, space is there ready to receive it? We don't seem to run out of it. And if you took everything out of the space, right, all of it, galaxies and quasars and all of it, how big would it be? How could you measure it? Where would the dividing line be? And yet, everything I just said arose in and was perceived by consciousness. Even the infinite space is received by consciousness. The mission of spiritual life is first to recognize that consciousness is what you are. You can call it a pure awareness. You can call it Buddha nature. You can call it the self. You can call it the non-self. The name is unimportant because your direct experience of it is what you're experiencing right now, and the one who is having the experience. The one who is having that experience, simply disidentified with anything that is being experienced, is the first step. That's the awakening that ends suffering. And then you turn around and you look back out and you say, what is this? Where you bring all of it back to yourself. First there's just one and nothing, and then it's one and everything. But it's not even things anymore. It's not everything, because there aren't any things. Look at your dream at night. They're not things. They're appearances. And nothing more. There are no things. There's only this one beingness, Sat Chidananda, consciousness, being consciousness and joy. And on that note, I will go say hello to the folks that are here and open the floor for any questions or requests. We take requests. We take requests in this lounge. So, hello Brent. Good to see you. There's Jay and Ava. There's Andy saying hello to everybody. There's my buddies David and Elaine, Robbie, Romania, all over the world again. There's Liza. Happy Sunday to you. And Ursula in Portugal, and Patricia down in Los Angeles, at least down there for me. It'd be up there if you're in Mexico. There's Carl in Ireland, Dorte. We got Denmark and New York, Mary, Barbara, Rosario. Carl, hi GP. Does the body always hold the same vibration as consciousness? Or has it to be retrained, much like the mind has to be redirected when learning to no longer identify as the separate self? The body is itself, it doesn't hold a vibration. Notice when you say that, you turn the body into an object that has this objective existence and that it is vibrating. Right? It's like saying that the sound you hear, right, is vibrating. No, sound is vibration. No vibration, no sound. Right? You could think of the instrument that's vibrating, and the metaphor will fall apart at that point. The body is itself a vibration. And that which is vibrating is consciousness. So it is not that it is something that is holding the same vibration as consciousness. It's a realization that the body is consciousness. It is consciousness known as opposed to consciousness as knower. And then the knower and the knowing and the known all fold into each other and become one. Now, as this process of awakening, disidentification with the body-mind complex, with experience, with what's arising, is that, and instead identifying as the ultimate perceiver of all of those, that is not a form. In that process, we will be retraining the mind. This is why in all the traditions, even contemplative prayer, there is this focus on focused attention on one thing. If it's a path, a bhakti path, a path of devotion, it's the focus of attention on your guru or on God, whatever God, however you perceive that God to be. Even in Hinduism, which has a lot of gods to choose from, there is kind of your God. There's the one that you become devoted to. It may be one of the major ones, like Shiva or Brahma or Vishnu, or it may be a lesser one, or it may be your teacher, your particular guru from in your neighborhood, your friendly neighborhood guru. And so the mind does need to be trained. The understanding that I am this consciousness. And I think everybody here grasps that. But what happens? Doubts arise, confusion arises, distraction arises, right? And because of that, we seem to question the authenticity of our insight. Oftentimes, all it takes is a little bit of conscientious concentration, focus, right, to dissolve all of the doubts and the like. Sometimes it requires additional identification. Something subtle in us is still identified with the person. That we need to let that go. But oftentimes, it's simply a matter of, I know this is the truth, I'm going to trust that and not what's arising in my mind at this moment, not the doubting. And even go so far as to say, well, who's the doubter? Isn't doubt just something else that's arising in consciousness? Am I doubting? Am I the one who doesn't know? You could look at that as just as rooting yourself or living, abiding in the absolute, or you could see it as a process of retraining the system in alignment with what you've already seen. So you could see it as a progressive path, you could see it as a sudden path, right? because there really isn't any difference. Right? Whatever's arising for you in this moment is what's arising for you. And it may be this, bam, this huge explosion that's the great insight, or it may be little steps at a time. It will be perceived as a retraining, and in fact can and probably should be engaged in that way. If somebody wants to learn meditation, depending on the form of meditation, oftentimes you'll start with the breathing. Sometimes even subtler than that, just the area around your nostrils and your upper lip, where you just keep your attention there. And it wanders off, and you bring it back. And it wanders off, and you bring it back. And you wander it off. But eventually, it doesn't take all that long to get to the point where you can actually hold that attention there for a few moments. Well, the moment you can do that, you have a level of concentration. Now, if you took that same level of concentration and turned it on who am I and held that question, right? Well, you're approaching the whole spiritual practice from both perspectives at the same time. Because there's oftentimes this argument between the progressive path and the sudden path. And if you look at either one of them, both of them recognizes the other. And when it's Rinzai and Soto, right? Soto is just It's sudden awakening, but you just sit there until it happens. Whereas Rinzai is koans and it's really intense. And same with, it can be that way with insight meditation. Anytime you do a meditation for an extended period of time, so there is both an opening and a retraining. When you sit down to meditate, you can either sit down as somebody trying to become enlightened, right, which is a couple steps away, or you could sit as one who is realizing they're enlightened. You can sit as somebody trying to become a Buddha, or you can sit as the Buddha. Now your mind will say, yeah, but you're not really a Buddha, you're trying to become one. Is it true? If there's even a split second where you are just there, completely aware and completely focused, you're the Buddha, right then and there. As Suzuki Roshi, very famous Zen master, he said, there are no enlightened beings. There are only enlightened moments. Now, if you take that in, it's suddenly, oh, there's not a destination out there that I'm trying to get to. It's right here. It's this moment as an enlightened moment. Then I am the Buddha, which is the truth. Within all of us is the awakened one. That's what Buddha means, awakened one. Look, you can't wake yourself up, right? Nobody can do that. Sometimes you'll begin to come out of it and you'll realize you're sleeping and maybe still stuck in the sleep, but something pulled you out of sleep. What? What made this subject that we're talking about here interesting to you? What pulled you and said, look at this is important, and oh, this is important. Something tapped you on the shoulder. It's the awakened one that's in you. The seed of the awakened one, the seed of the Buddha, is in you. Only the awakened one can wake you up. If you're in a room full of sleeping people, there's nobody there to wake anybody up. Somebody has got to be the alarm clock. And it's that one, the awakened one in you, that is tapping you on the shoulder, that brings you here, that brings you to others, to spiritual books, to meditative practice. So I hope that answers it. I know I kind of went off a bit. Much like the mind has to be redirected when learning to no longer identify as the separate self. You're always just training the mind to stop the identification. Because you don't have, you are that. Right? And the realization is, oh, I am that, and all of this is just a bunch of thoughts that said I wasn't. So there's no realization to have, actually. It's the ignorant one disappears, and what's left is the awakened one, the Buddha, you. Does that help, Carl? I hope so. Hello, Dale. Andy, what or who is aware of consciousness, if anything, anyone? Well, what could be aware of consciousness? Really think about it. In your sentence, there's consciousness and there's something aware of consciousness. Right? Well, what's aware of consciousness if it's not conscious? Is it not conscious? Right? Nothing is aware of consciousness. Consciousness is the awareness. So there's no who or what involved. Or you could say that the who and what is consciousness. See, there's a feeling that I'm aware of being conscious, right? And that there's a me. You can see how subtle it is, that there's somebody of which consciousness is an attribute, and I'm aware of that consciousness. But that awareness is consciousness. What else could it be? It can't be unconsciousness. It can't be blankness. It can't be a stone. It's got to be that which is aware, which is consciousness. Now, if you start thinking of yourself as that consciousness rather than somebody that is experiencing consciousness, well, the days of darkness are numbered. The days of ignorance are over. Because that's the essential split that takes place. We think of consciousness as something other than myself. And just look closely and go, well, then I would have to be another consciousness, right? To be that one, or I wouldn't be conscious at all. Consciousness is what is aware. Right? So there's no what or who. There's just consciousness. All whats and whos are things that arise in consciousness. Right? And it's fine. It's fine to have the stuff that arises. Because whatever arises is made of consciousness. Because there's no other substance in the universe. It's not consciousness compressed in a skull that's looking at something that it exists independently of it. The world, the universe, everything as it is, arises as an image or vibration in consciousness, and it's made of consciousness. It is the substance of the universe. And the universe is this constantly changing, constantly in flux, but never actually becoming anything objective, separate, on its own. There's only the one. You are that consciousness. But even the question, what or who is aware of consciousness, arose in and was perceived by consciousness, wasn't it? It is seemingly the hardest thing to grasp that it's me. Oh, I'm it. God's street name is me. Oh, who else is seeing all of this? There's not somebody else in here. Oh, it's me. I am consciousness. And somehow, all of this has arisen in consciousness. I have no idea how. Even the appearance of other beings that seem to be a separate consciousness, but they're just appearing in consciousness. And it's not my consciousness. There's not somebody there who has this as a possession. This is all I know is consciousness. That's all I ever experience. So who is this I? Well, this I is consciousness. And that consciousness is infinite. I am that. And so are you. But at that level, there's not even an I and a you. There's only, well, there are no words. Yeah, there are no words to explain one without a second. Does that strike home, Andy? Please tell me. I'll get down to it in a minute. Gnome from Ireland. Hello, Gnome. Good to see you. Is it Nome or Gnome? Not sure how to pronounce that. It's a Nome. Tian. Hello, Tian. Hi, GP. In my experience, the identification with the body is just happening automatically along with the feeling of suffering. I can be aware of it, but how can I stop it from happening? Thanks. Thanks, GP. Oh, you're welcome, Tian. You don't need to stop it, right? By saying you're going to how do I stop it? You're making it something that has an objective existence that is causing you suffering. And out of the sense of suffering would arise the sense that I want to stop it. Right? Yes, identification with the body is a set of thoughts, sensations, and emotions that arise. Something arises in your experience, and immediately following that, there's a sense of something arising that takes ownership of that experience. Are you not witnessing both of those? And if you are the witness of both of those, does it matter to you whether they stay or go, whether it happens or doesn't happen? Right? If you become aware of it, there's no longer any need to stop it. Right? Oh, you just let it happen. This is part of of human experience. This is part of the humanness, that sense of identification. As long as I make it a problem that has to be fixed or go away, I am feeding it, and I'm feeding it good, high-quality food. It's the kind it likes. Right? It's like GMO-free, pasture-raised. I mean, it's the best. So notice that there is a sense that is suffering that wants to get rid of what it now thinks is the source of its suffering, which is, identification. So how do I stop the identification? You stop the one who thinks they need to stop the identification. You go, I don't need to stop it. It's just happening, and it's happening in me, but not to me. There's a storm going on. The sky is not affected. You have to identify as the sky in which it's appearance. There's nothing left that wants anything to ever change. And the mind doesn't like that. It means this is going to be, I'm going to suffer forever. No. The desire for it to be different is the cause of suffering. The moment that's gone, so is the suffering. It's just, there's identification again. And now it becomes almost like a game. Right? I'm having enlightened moments every time this thing comes up. I don't have to be enlightened. I don't have to be the Buddha, whatever that means. I just have to right now, there it is. There's an event arising. There's the conditioned pattern arising of identification. And that's all identification is. It's just another conditioned pattern based on the sense of being a separate self. So, there's the embodiment or the manifestation of the underlying notion or assumption that I am the body, and therefore I am a separate being. And I'm separate from this thing that's going on that I somehow have to stop. You don't. You just go, there it is again. That's all Buddha did. Mara came back numerous times after the night under the Bodhi tree. That wasn't the last time Mara showed up for a bit of temptation. After Christ's 3 temptations in the wilderness, Mara, or Satan, didn't say, okay, cool guy. I kept back. He kept coming back. He kept coming back. He kept coming back. It was an ongoing thing. So, now it's arising. And now it's arising. And now it's arising. And it gets subtler and subtler as you see with that, how do I stop it from happening? You're actually participating on a subtler level with the identification. It's even more subtle. Beautiful. I'm going to be with that now. And I'm going to see how far down this actually goes. Until it goes all the way down to there's nothing left but you. And pure love for everything. Does that help, Tian? Tian Inga. You'll tell me if it is. Benji. Hey, GP. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. Thank you for being here. I'm very new on my journey, as you can probably tell. Awakened may make someone more fearful of death than someone who says he isn't awakened. It's a question. Can being awakened make someone more fearful of death? No. What it will do is make you aware of how much of your life you've spent avoiding your fear of death. That it can do. Absolutely, because now you're awake to it. And the awakening means you become awake to all, and it's a gradual process. You become increasingly awake to all of the ways in which you have been trying to avoid the fear that is inevitable, that arises when we identify as a separate self. If I'm identified as a separate self, if I am this body, then the destiny of the body is my destiny, which means I'm going to die. If I'm identified with consciousness, then death is not even in the equation. It can't die. It had no birth. It's timeless. It's in a completely different dimension. So birth and death, life and death are simply things that arise. And they're happening all the time. I took a walk up into the hills, the mountains here yesterday, and I was just, I was just amazed looking around wherever there was life, and it was just teeming with life, but it was also teeming with death, right? There was the branch laying there, and there was moss grown all over it. There was like another dead stump, and there were mushrooms all over it, and there were bugs, and there were leaves that were crushed, that were becoming the food for something else. It was like, wow, it was just life, death, life, death, life, death, perceived by consciousness, which is neither. It is neither in the birth nor in the death. Those are only the appearance of the constant kaleidoscope of change and impermanence that makes life possible. And so nothing is actually born, nothing actually dies. It is the energy or vibration of consciousness itself that is constantly transforming itself and changing form. Now, awakening to that, the scales get kind of taken off your eyes, and you begin to see all the places that you have invested yourself for happiness that aren't going to deliver any happiness. The fears that we suppress and hide from ourselves, they start to come to the surface. The traumas that we experience, the degradation, the pain, the self-hatred and self-judgment, they all start to come to the surface, and without proper guidance, it can be overwhelming. Right? There's a lot of people who have, they put themselves through enormous, discipline and stuff to attain these high states of being, and then freaked out. I've worked with a couple of people who had the Kundalini experience, right? So this incredible rush of energy, but they were completely unprepared for it. They were obviously taught by an irresponsible teacher, teacher who didn't know any better, right, who brought about this experience. Their lives were miserable after that. Right? It was interesting because one of them, I couldn't get her to let go of it. She wanted to hold on to that experience, even though it was making her life miserable. She needed some real training. She needed some genuine meditative training and some real guidance from a real teacher. So the awakening, don't worry about it's going to make me afraid of death. Let it be gradual. It doesn't have to be and shouldn't be, if it's taught correctly and you're guided correctly. It is a very gentle process of awakening one thing at a time. And sometimes something will come up very strongly with somebody, and they say, oh, God, I'm in the middle of work, this thing happens, what do? I said, well, do exactly what your nervous system knows how to do. Suppress it. Suppress it. Say, look, keep this down until later. We'll deal with this later. Oh, your nervous system knows how to do that. Suppression is just like, it's one of his major skills. Say, okay, I didn't know I could do that. When it comes up, not now. I've had that experience. I've had those experiences. I've had meltdowns in a parking lot. I've also had this experience when I'm right in the middle of something. They said, you can't come up now, please. I go, okay, later. See you later. And went down, and I could function. Because sometimes the stuff comes up, you need to be in a space where you don't have to function. And so it can completely play itself out, where you can weep for an hour. Right? And if it's a good retreat is a place where that stuff can happen. So be gentle, right? Don't be afraid of the awakening. Remember, you're not waking yourself up. The awakened one in you is waking you up. Is waking up the rest of itself. It's bringing all of it into alignment with itself. And the nature of awakening is pure love, pure compassion. It is the goddess Kanon, or Kuan Yin if you prefer. It is a mother's love. She's the mother goddess. It is Gaia, who doesn't do anything to hurt the child, only to help it grow. God is not punitive. Gently corrective. The punitive God is made up, is a made up thing. So don't worry about it. Right? Just allow yourself to wake up a little at a time. Just, am I more awake today than I was yesterday? Is this moment awake? What am I feeling right in this moment? I'm right in this moment. I'm a little bit afraid that the fear of death may come up too strongly. Oh, okay. So I'm just going to be with that fear. Because it hasn't come up. Just the idea that, well, maybe it will. So, okay. So I'm just going to be with that. And maybe even have a little trust that Grace knows what she's doing. And that the power that brought me here must bring me home. And not scare the shit out of me along the way. Thank you very much. Buddha was gentle. Christ was gentle. Incredibly gentle and forgiving and tender and never condemned anybody. The only time he lost his temper was with the arrogant and the greedy. Those who were cruel. And even then, it was just a loving correction. Well, sometimes it was pretty harsh, but with anybody who genuinely came to him with an open heart, they got nothing but tenderness and forgiveness and love, and a lesson that they could chew on. So, fear not, my friend Benji. Ava, to train the mind to stop identification, yes, I somehow feel it. So to do it every possible moment? Well, every moment you think of, whenever you're thinking of something, right? And you notice that during the day we'll have idle moments and our minds are just kind of going off on nonsense. If the awakened one in you taps you on the shoulder and you go, oh, well that was just kind of my mind wandering off somewhere. Let me bring it back to my breathing or to a mantra or just feeling what's in my body in this moment. Whatever anchor point is good. For many it's just, take a couple of deep breaths. Yes, bring myself back here. Right? That's it. That's all there is. That's all there is to it. We don't want to turn this into a federal case, right? And I can feel your enthusiasm about it, Ava, which means that just practice more, right? Just spend some more time just sitting with yourself, breathing. Just that exercise, it's called anapata, which is just, I think it's anatapasati is the Sanskrit word for it, which is just breathing and just your whole attention is focused right here on the nostrils and the upper lip. That's usually the precursor to vipassana, which is a whole body scan. But you don't have to do that. This is enough, and it just like refocuses attention and trains you for deeper concentration. So the mind just doesn't get as distracted. The mind becomes, that is the psychological mind, the flow of thoughts becomes less like a dog, right? A squirrel, right? It becomes disciplined. It becomes quiet, and eventually it just really does settle down, so that you can have very deep, penetrating inquiry without having anything distract you, because that's what it takes. It takes that kind of concentration. I'm practicing it more and more these days. Just noticing how easy it is, especially in our world, to get distracted. Just kind of, come back to here, come back to here, come back to here. And you'll notice there'll be a feeling, and I can feel in you, oh, I want to disidentify. I want to disidentify with this. You go, notice that, right? Oh, that's another road that I could get grabbed on. I'm trying to disidentify, well, who's trying to disidentify? Oh, that too is something else that's just arisen. And in that moment, I'm disidentified. It's just something that's all disidentification is. I'm simply watching it as an event taking place and not me. That's it. And the moment you catch yourself engaged in it and take a step back, boom, disidentification has happened. And you're just sitting in idle now, right? Waiting for the next thing to arise. And it will. No, it won't let you down. There'll be more. Thanks, Ava. Andy. The one is not an individual among individuals, but rather undifferentiated all? Question mark. Period and question mark. So statement and question. Thank you so much, G. Yes, that strikes home. Very good. Very good. Yes, because we do this all the time, especially in the West, right? God is a person amongst many persons. He's the ultimate person, right? Not as principle, not as love itself. Even though the more mystic scriptures, exactly what it says: God is love, and he whose love is of God. Right? Which to me is really very blunt. It's not someone who loves. It is love itself. Love itself does not belong to a person. It is universal, and everywhere there is some loving act or some loving deed, some loving word, some loving thought, there's God, because that is the manifestation of love itself, which cannot possibly be put into words, can it? There's an infinite number of ways in which love is known, yet love itself, it's inexpressible. This is the nature of things. And that love is your true nature. And you can see how that love is not bounded by space and time. It's there. Even if there was no space and time, there was not a single thing in the entire universe to express it, it would still exist. It doesn't require an expression for its existence. Yet its nature is to express itself. How can love not? Right? Love is just bursting. It's pregnant with affection. Yeah. I mean, look. What do you do if something really great happens to you and you're really happy? What's the first thing you do? You call somebody and tell them, "Oh, this is the greatest thing that ever happened to me." It can't. Love cannot. It has to create an infinite universe in order to fulfill its own need to be love. Of course, it's not need in the sense that we think of need, but anyway, I think you get the picture. It's an indivisible whole. There's not an individual among individuals. Sergey, please, what is the difference between Buddha and Christ? Well, as historical figures, it is the same message appearing in two different places, two different cultures, 500 years apart, in a very different world. In India, where Shakyamuni became the Buddha, Siddhartha became Buddha, it's this enormous, rich heritage of spiritual language, spiritual inquiry. The rishis, the sages, there were sages that predated Buddha. The Upanishads, which is the distillation of all the totally non-dual things in the Vedas, was actually written somewhere between 500 BC and 200 BCE, in that 300 years, right after the Buddha. So it's a time that had a language, a cultural background, where that kind of thing could get a level of expression that was extremely detailed and extremely accurate, and not need to be hidden in parallels. Christ appeared at a time when, they were all ignorant, right? Neither he nor his disciples could read or write. He was a carpenter. He didn't read he didn't have access to any of that kind of stuff. It wasn't until Paul that somebody showed up that was educated, and then Mark, who both Matthew and Luke were based on, was Greek, and so he wrote in Greek, and he was learned. He could read and write, and he knew more of the culture and that sort of thing. So, but what was the essential message? Well, the essential message was, for the Buddha, it was complete. It was a total message, because because both the culture and the intellectual capacity of the time was capable of the full expression of what the truth is. Not so in the time of Christ. The metaphors, the language, the level of learning, even in as part of the Roman Empire was not particularly intellectual. They were very much they were businessmen. It was about conquest and acquisition. They were ferengi, or capitalists, right? So it was not the same kind of environment. But the essential message, although scholars would disagree, they thought the scholars regard Jesus as an apocalyptic prophet who prophesied the end of the world within a generation, which turned out to be wrong. And so there's a lot about that. But hidden in what in fact was a lot of that had to do with Jewish history, and the fact that there was this idea of the coming of a Messiah who was going to overthrow their oppressors, which in this case was the Romans. Kind of all got jumbled up. So I just kind of look at what did he actually say? What are the kinds of things? And when I hear the things he said, like, here's one. This is from the Gospel of Thomas. And he says, "He who drinks of my mouth shall become as I am, and I shall be he." Now, Buddha could have said that. That's Buddhism. The transcending of the individual self, becoming one with, to use Meister Eckhart's term, one with the Godhead. Right? There's so many similarities between the life of Christ and the life of Buddha, which is common when you're looking at their lives through the eyes of mythology and metaphor. The virgin birth, all of the special characters who show up in history had an unusual birth. Buddha was born out of his mother's side while she was hanging from a tree. Jesus was born of a virgin, and wise men showed up at both of them. So there's all this stuff. We just kind of sorted out and said, what did he actually say? He said the kingdom of heaven is spread upon the earth. The kingdom of God is spread upon the earth, but the people don't see it. That's the clear expression to me that it is, when he talked about repentance and a shifting of the heart, it was a shift of perception, right? To acknowledge not just his oneness with God, with a Trinity, but the oneness of everything with God. God as immanent, not God as person. There was actually even a group of people, I think they were called the Marcionites, who believed that Yahweh, the Jewish God, was a lesser God who was actually kind of a jerk, and that Christ came from the bigger God to basically undo the work of Yahweh. That was actually one of the beliefs in the various sects that were there in early Christianity. So the differences between them are cultural. I think the essential enlightenment was identical. That Jesus was an enlightened being, as far as I can tell, but like every enlightened being, they were going to express that enlightenment within the context of the culture in which they appeared, and do the best that they can, just like we do now. Right? That you see, an enlightened being, you probably won't recognize them. They won't be wearing robes, right? They'll be wearing, shirts and jeans. It's just the metaphors of the culture, the metaphors of the time. So what you're looking at are luminaries who appeared in a particular time with a particular message. And if you understand at the root what that message is, you'll see the similarities. If you don't, you'll only see it historically, in which case the whole message will get lost. So does that help? Sergey, is that answered for you? Nice question. Thank you. Henrik, good to see you, my friend. David Elaine, when actions or reactions result from our experiences, how can we discern if this is arising from our true selves as consciousness, or what may be a very subtle sense of ego or sense of separation? Wow. Well, whatever arises on the screen is arising to consciousness. And the only thing that's going to be able to discern a subtle sense of ego or separation is consciousness. The ego the ego is not a thing that can discern itself, right? So the very desire to be able to tell the difference is the awakening of consciousness. That's the awakened one tapping you on the shoulder. Maybe this is more subtle. Right? So there's not like a checklist and go, okay, it has this character, this and this character. Okay, it's ego. It's like, well, it's very subtle. If it's subtle, the good news is I'm more subtle. Whatever it is, I'm more subtle than that. And so I can now just kind of, all right, so let me just be with it then. Let me explore it. Let me feel it into it. Let me watch it. Right? Let me become just full of loving witnessing, loving curious awareness, and just watch it until it reveals itself. And it will. It has to. Right? We don't want to identify ourselves as somebody trying to get rid of the ego, right? Which is very subtle, right? Oh, I've got to overcome. Because notice what that does. It turns the ego into a thing, an entity, a power, right? That gives rise to stuff. It isn't. The stuff arises and it's going to have a flavor about it. That flavor, if it has kind of a bad smell, then it is ego. If you peel off the ego, you might find that what's actually arisen doesn't have that. That somehow something else arose and kind of glommed on it, like a barnacle on the side of a ship, right? That it doesn't really belong to it, right? And because nothing can actually arise that doesn't come from consciousness. Even the idea of ego has to arise in consciousness, meaning it too must be consciousness. Whoa. Okay. Right? Because even the thought, ego, which is not a thing, it's only an appearance, also must be made of consciousness. So consciousness is so vast and so infinite that it can even give rise to that which appears to be the opposite of it. Okay? Because it is beyond what we think of as consciousness, conscious and unconscious. You have a duality. It is beyond that. So everything that arises is the manifestation of consciousness. So be with it, right? Because you are consciousness. And so actively engage as the awakened one with love. So it's not like, got to get rid of the ego. It's like, oh, I want to see love here. I want to see what this is. What is this? What is this? And now it becomes Leela. It becomes a play. And, it's not just child's play. It's like Shakespeare. Sometimes at the end, the stage is littered with bodies. But it's a play. Look at this again. How can we discern? Yes. Yes, that desire to discern at that subtle level is inspired by and is the manifestation of that pure self, the pure consciousness. The desire to see things as they are. Right? And the willingness to look. And then the exposure of all of it as being, oh, this is all the play of consciousness. Even the ego is consciousness. It has to be. Where else could it be? Thank you, David. Yeah. Somebody else asked that question. I might not have given the same answer, but you can hear it. Carl, thanks, G. So enlightenment is just moment after moment of experiencing myself. Yes, that's it. That's all it is. It's not a point in time. If it was a point in time, it would have a beginning, wouldn't it? So in fact, enlightenment is simply the nature of what you are experiencing all the time. It is the true nature of all experience. Awakening is not a point in time. It is the theme that is playing itself out all the time. And so in order for awakening, the awakened one, to appear as an experience, it must manifest the asleep one. Both are, therefore, the manifestation of awakening. That's all that's ever gone on, ever. And it's all that's happening now. Scott, hey. Here in the non-dual space, the self and consciousness are one. Materialists say consciousness emerges from the complexity of matter. So now with AI, we have emergent abilities, meaning if you only program English, somehow AI can, on its own, understand Persian and much more. People are starting to claim AI is sentient. We don't even understand what we are inadvertently creating until much later. How do we synthesize this from the non-dual perspective? Well, the non-dual perspective is very simple. Consciousness is the essential. It did not arise from anything else. Everything arose from it. Therefore, nothing possesses consciousness. Consciousness possesses everything. So AI is wrong. It's not artificial intelligence. It is simulated intelligence. It is simply a very clever program that puts stuff together under rules that make the stuff that it puts together make some degree of sense according to this set of rules. There's nothing cognitive there. There's nothing aware of what it's doing. There's nothing creative there. As a matter of fact, it doesn't create anything. It relies on stuff that's already been created. Now, well, I won't go off into the whole implications of it socially and the like. Let's just look at it from the non-dual perspective, which means it's just another manifestation of consciousness. That's all it is, as is everything else, as is a rock, or as the cat that's sitting here in front of me, as is this shirt, as am I, as are you, just appearing in consciousness. So the materialists assume everything is made out of matter, and that it's only a matter of time before they find whatever little thing is in the brain that is self-aware. But you don't have to think on it very long. Then this particular combination of things, it's like where in there is the cognition? And of course, there's the wonderful story about the guy, I can't remember his name now, he wrote the book Proof of Heaven, who had a near-death experience with images, and he was having conversations, and just a trip he went on. But the disease that put him into a coma and almost killed him completely destroyed his neocortex, making it, according to everything they knew, impossible for him to have any kind of experience at all. And he did. Which means that's the kind of evidence that says, well, maybe it's not, but the materialists, they just won't have it. But there's plenty of scientists that go, you know what, we don't know. We do not know what consciousness is. The real diehards, like a Richard Dawkins or something, they say, well, we know it all. It's just a matter of time. We'll discover it. But most of them going, we don't know. It is so different than everything else that it's a total mystery. And it will remain a mystery because the scientific method is incapable of discovering what it is, because it's based on subject-object relationship. And you can't step outside of yourself to examine yourself as an object, which means classical analysis is out the window. The scientific method, it can't solve this problem. There must be a different kind of subjective science, subjective inquiry, that looks at it from the inside, that examines consciousness where consciousness exists, namely myself. That's called Advaita Vedanta. And that's exactly the process that the sages developed thousands of years ago, that has changed and morphed and developed over time. But that's kind of the deal. So there are already people who are claiming that AI is sentient already, just because the program lets it make associations and make things happen to make it look as if there's something conscious there, something self-aware. And of course that's based on the assumption that that's all we are. That somehow the complexity of the brain got such that we became self-aware. But it doesn't take long to ponder. If you really ponder that, you go, how? How does that happen? Where? Where is it? Where's this point of cognition? And how can anything be self-aware? If you really ponder it, it goes, wow, it doesn't make any sense. And in fact, if you look really carefully, and this is a radical thing to say, there's no evidence, there's no real objective evidence for the existence of matter at all. Nobody can step outside of consciousness and examine what they're perceiving to see that it's made of matter. Nobody can do it, which means the entire superstructure of material inquiry is an assumption that is held together by ideology and belief because there's no evidence for it, nor could there ever be any evidence for it. It's fascinating to really examine it and look at it. But yet we create these things, and then we invest them, we project sentience on them, because you are sentient, you are consciousness. And as you put out, what we're inadvertently creating, and of course we're not creating it for the benefit of humanity. A lot of this stuff is being done by military and by businesses to try to fool people. I mean, it's the whole impetus behind it is not for the betterment, is not love. Okay. So, on that note, I'll let that go. Jay, is the Kundalini and realization the same, or is Kundalini a state? No, they're not the same. They are not the same. Yes, Kundalini is a state. It comes and goes like all other states. Right? Realization is the realization of no state. I didn't come and go. Right? That's the realization. I experienced Kundalini. It was there. It wasn't there. Now it's there. Right? It represents the actual experience of it as energy rising in the spine and all that, and the chakras and all that, which is fine. It's a great experience. Well, for some it isn't. But it isn't. If you look at it symbolically, metaphorically, the way the chakras were really intended, and the rise in the Kundalini. Kundalini simply means coiled snake. That's what it means. And the snake has always been a symbol of resurrection, rebirth. It's simply the arising, the flowering of consciousness, shedding the animal or instinctual nature, and rising into its spiritual nature. Of course, in the West, that's interpreted as some kind of physical peak experience. Just like, yoga has been reduced to a bunch of exercises. And the yoga was created for the sole purpose of making the body capable of sitting for long periods of time in meditation. It wasn't for, yoga pants, as wonderful as they are. So, Kundalini, as it is practiced most commonly, is just an experience of energy moving. It is not realization. Realization is not an experience. It does not come and go. If it did, it would be yet another experience. So what is it that witnesses the Kundalini? What is it that has that experience? Is that coming and going? Is that even something that can be experienced, or must experience always be something that arises and subsides, something that is being perceived by consciousness? Consciousness itself cannot be experienced. There'd have to be something there to experience it. So there. So it's supposed to refer to a process and practice of awakening, right? That the fireworks and the Hollywood special effects that may occur as a result or on the path, right, are a sideshow. They're not the main event. And there can be lots of them. And it's very easy to get stuck. You can get into special states of consciousness where there's lights and warmth and expansiveness. And there has to be the correct guidance and teaching that says, okay, you're experiencing that. Who are you? Who is it that's having the experience? Even the experience of spaciousness and vastness and the falling away of the self. It's even beyond that. Who is having the experience? Who is consciousness? Or who am I as consciousness? I'm not this body. I'm not these thoughts. I'm not anything that I am experiencing. Yet all these experiences are arising in me. I am that consciousness. Well, God, what is that? Benji says, ha, 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 thank you so much. You're welcome, Benji. Ava, thank you, dearest G, much for your teaching for me today. You're welcome. Mary, why do we even call our nature love God? In my youth, the word God has been so tainted. Yeah, unfortunately, that's correct, because it became personal. God is a person. And I heard Christian apologists arguing all the time, even using scientific words and stuff, and that somehow it has to be a person who created the universe. And that's just a very primitive Bronze Age kind of idea, personification of their tribal god, just the projection of the mind that sees itself as separate in a separate world, battling for resources and that sort of stuff. I use the word God simply because it's common in our culture to use the word God, and I try to redefine it. God is just a word for the impersonal nature of all things, of which there was no creator. It did not have a beginning. It is the nature of being itself. And so you can throw out the word God because it is so tainted. Don't bother using it, and just saying it's love. The nature of existence is love. And that was not created. Right? It didn't. One moment there was love, and then the next minute it made something for it to be love. Well, then what was it doing before that? It's eternal. It's timeless. You can't even say it's eternal. It's beyond the whole thing. So throw out the word God. You don't need it. There's plenty of other words. Buddha nature, pure awareness, pure love, the goddess energy, the Divine Mother, the Kuan Yin. It's one of my favorites. I've adopted Kuan Yin as my mother. Mine wasn't all that good, so I said, okay, I'm gonna get another one. Kuan Yin, yeah, the goddess of wisdom and compassion. Yep, that's my mom. So, the word's been so tainted. So you can either just throw the word out, Mary, or you can reclaim it and just just kind of rewire your system to whenever you hear the word God, it means love. It means pure love. It means not a person, but love itself. Love as principle of the universe. Love as the law of all things. Love is the nature of all being. That is that. And that's what the mystics did. The Christian, the Sufi, the Jewish, all of the mystics of the Abrahamic traditions. It's exactly what they did. They simply redefined God as the one. Got Meister Eckhart in trouble because he said even God, the God we worship, and Christ and myself all emerged from the same essence, which he called the Godhead or the ground of being. Got him in trouble. If he wasn't so popular and male, he would have met an untimely end. But he was male, very popular, a priest. Everybody loved speaking, so he wasn't put on trial for heresy till after he had died. I don't know if he was one of those that they actually dug up to put on trial. Oh, wow, weird. Sergey, holy, 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 thanks, holy blessings to you all. Oh, wonderful, Sergey, wonderful. Yes, amen, thanks. You're welcome. DNA, cool question. Yes. Oh, Sergey, good, sunk in. I can tell by your enthusiasm. Wonderful. Oh. David and I, thanks, G, for your lovely answer. And thanks, Andy. Yoga pants, as wonderful as they are. I can't imagine a world without them. They got nothing to do with yoga, but I don't care. Indus River, what is consciousness made of? During Buddha's time, the word consciousness wasn't there as much. Right, that's correct. Remember, these are words. In Buddha's time, it was mind. And they would refer to that as mind, the one mind. Right? Now, it's the one mind. It's not made of anything else. Right? It is the indivisible substance. So they would use the word consciousness, but it was different the way we do. What I would say is pure consciousness or pure awareness. They would talk, at that time, Buddha's time, and really after that for a while, they would refer to that as mind. And so the practices were all purifying mind, getting to the pure mind, which was not the discursive mind, not the distracted mind, not the different words, but they would make them in different ways. But the essence, the source of it, was pure mind. And the Buddha was the one mind. As Huang Po put it, he said, all of the Buddhas and all sentient beings are nothing but the one mind, and nothing else exists. And what it's pointing at is what I and many these days would refer to as consciousness, is that nothing else exists except mind. Like I say in dreams, the dream is just nothing but mind, producing things. You come back to this place, it's like, oh, it's just nothing but mind. Right? Everything is emerging out of mind, so the substance of it is mind. These days we tend to use the word mind to refer to the thinking process, the psychological mind. But in some traditions of metaphysics, they refer to the one mind. God is that one mind. So whether you call it consciousness or pure awareness, and you're hearing pure awareness and pure consciousness emerge a lot in more modern Buddhist teaching and speaking. You'll hear talking about awareness and that sort of thing. So it really is just the vernacular of the time. So, but when they were speaking about mind, it really is referring to the same thing what we would say with consciousness. They even used consciousness in terms of there was an eye consciousness or sight, right? Because there was something in consciousness. There was an ear consciousness or a hearing consciousness. There was a thinking consciousness. And so they kind of saw these as different domains, all being perceived by this, the one mind. Or Buddha nature was another word for that one consciousness, or the one mind. But the important thing no matter what the word is, it is the essential. It is not made of anything else. It does not derive its nature from anything other than itself. It is completely self-referenced. It is the thing science is searching for. Who recognizes that everything we experience at the perceptual level is simply the appearance of stuff going on at a level beneath what we can perceive. So I see that tree, but that tree, I call it a tree, and in the object of mind, tree, and it's got this, but if I look closely, it's made up of leaves and branches and stems, and all sorts of things are in there, right? And then I look even closer, and the branches are made of wood, and so you keep diving down, and every level is an appearance of the level below it, and draws its nature from the nature of that which is below it. And of course, you just want to keep going to find something has to be there that is not the appearance of something else. It can't be an infinite recursion. At some point, you have to find something that's actually there, the bottom of the pile, right? The essential. And so far, science has said, they haven't found it. Well, that's because they're looking in the wrong place. The essential is that which is doing the looking. It is consciousness itself. It is the indivisible, irreducible one. That is the source of everything. And as long as we believe it to be personal, like my consciousness or your consciousness, rather than the substance and principle of the universe, we'll be doubting that. We'll be trying to think, well, how am I creating the universe? You're not. You didn't. There's no you there. That you was also a creation of it. So I hope that clarifies it for you. Indus, beautiful name, Indus River. Wow. Anyway, Scott, so there's no way to reconcile anything separate from the non-dual perspective of one, including AI. Seems like AI will continue to fuel materialism from that perspective. Love Ferengi reference. Good. A Star Trek fan. Yeah. Well, AI is going to continue to fuel materialism because materialism is driving it. It's yet another area where the materialistic view is dominant. And so it's this feedback loop, right? If I believe it's material, see everything, if you're a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail, right? So from the materialist point of view, everything is a feedback loop that substantiates the reality of of materiality, not recognizing that it's a projection, it's an assumption that keeps playing back to itself, which reinforces itself. Until that assumption is challenged and scrutinized, it's just going to keep going. And in the process, it will be ignoring all of the obvious evidences that say there's nobody really there. Okay? Siri uses the word I, but there's nobody there. And in fact, it is not taking us any place useful. In fact, it's going in exactly the opposite way. It's taking us further and further and further away from ourselves. And that will eventually be seen. I mean, it's like, the guys in the Manhattan Project, these brilliant scientists, the Oppenheimers, right? Frank and Robert. And that they came up with the atomic bomb. Not something valuable for humanity, the most destructive thing human beings have ever created. Right? And then in a moment of awakening, oh my God, I've become death. I don't know what happened. One of them actually was so repentant on it, he started the Science Museum, the Exploratorium in San Francisco, to teach kids about science and things like that. I mean, he's just crushed by the consequences, but they were just completely mesmerized by they weren't seeing that. They were just so lost in the little details and all the stuff and their own hubris about what a fantastic thing that they were doing, that when they suddenly realized what they had done and handed over to a bunch of people who were more than happy to use it, it was like, oh my God, what have I done? Oh, if only the people who took ownership of it would have seen that and immediately destroyed it forever. But no, we're not there yet. David and Elaine, the scientist Donald Hoffman, I'm familiar with him. In a discussion we heard recently, concurred that consciousness was primary and that the materialistic model would eventually be confined to the scientific dustbin, being unable to answer the fundamental evidence of experience. Yes, it is a fundamental evidence that we're all having. I know I am. There's nothing in the materialistic model that can account for that. So it's a big assumption. So yeah, you're seeing more and more scientists with the pedigrees, all the letters after their names and the like, and the credentials and the papers that are saying it's consciousness. It's the only answer. And so I like that, confined to the scientific dustbin of history. It will, and look at the consequences of materialism. Look, the world that we live in, right? Putting us on the verge of self-destruction. This is the consequence of materialism. Our politics, capitalism is materialistic. Materialism in a social and economic application. It is separation gone mad. Separation is madness in itself. Anyway, you're welcome. Scott. David Hoffman's user interface model overlaid on evolution and fitness is very interesting. Last I looked, he was looking for more advanced math proofs to further his theory. Interesting. You can't reduce consciousness to math. You want a model for consciousness? It's the universe. There's still this idea that somehow there's consciousness causing a universe as a creation, rather than being consciousness itself. Anyway, interesting. Andrew, hi G, do you think the psychological mind survives the end of the body? No, it does not. All of that is tied to the whole body-mind complex. The psychological mind disappears with that. What remains is the energetic level that gave rise to the psychological mind and the way it functions and the conditioning and all of that kind of stuff. That just creates a new psychological mind. It generates a new set of experiences and circumstances and vibrations and the like. But the actual psychological mind itself doesn't survive because it doesn't exist. It's just a flow of thoughts, right? There is no psychological mind. There's no thing that is thinking. There's only the flow of thoughts. The thoughts stop. So that's all there is to the psychological mind. If you're talking about the big mind, or the one mind, you're talking about consciousness. Consciousness is still there. There will be an awareness that, oh, the thoughts are gone. God, what a relief. That's the wonderful feeling of openness and spaciousness that everybody experiences. But the seeds of identification, the seeds of the vasanas are still there, which will eventually sprout and and the whole process will start over again. But it is whatever you have gained in spiritual insight and open-heartedness, that does remain. That digs itself into the earth. So it's not like we're always starting over from ground zero. It's not Groundhog Day. Yeah. So the body and mind are one. They are a flow of thoughts. Right? So there's not a thing called the body, nor is there a thing called the mind. It is a word given to a particular vibration, a particular functioning. In this case, the functioning of the flow of thoughts that we witness. This is the flow of sensation. We call that body, but there is no body as a thing. There's only the flow of sensation. And the same thing is true of emotion and thought. And those will just dissipate. They're gone. Then there's the experience of emptiness, which, if you're prepared for it, will be utter bliss. If you're not, fear will arise, and a little more training. That's all. Back to school for a bit. Benji, when people have a near-death experience, such as proof of heaven, they say about this state as oneness. Are these experiences their dreams, except they are just very vivid, that makes them more makes them think more? As some have come back with valuable information, unless these are to sell books. Last question for me, I promise. It's okay. Yeah, it's a great opportunity to sell books. It's as real as anything is. I mean, it's a genuine experience that they're having. For a moment, they have left their normal consciousness behind, the normal state of mind behind, to experience what's always here, that vast, empty oneness that is nothing but love. And it's perceived, there's a lot of similarities, but there's differences as well. Some people perceive it as Jesus, and others, as some other God, or, heaven, or they meet people that they used to know. So there's a coloring of the experience, right? That, we can't pinpoint what's the reality in it. Well, the reality in it is the individual, that is a consciousness, and the recognition they're not dead, that there's something else. And there's this experience of what it's like to be freed from the normal habitual patterns of the mind and conditioning and all of that. There's this momentary release, much like a mushroom trip, right? Where suddenly all of that's put on abeyance, and there's this incredible experience. But at the essence of that experience is the reality of the oneness of all being. There's an openness to it, but it closes back down again, just like it does for any kind of a awakening experience. But also like plant medicine and certain kinds of awakening experience and altered state of peak experiences and that sort of stuff, the impact of it actually remains and can have a very profound impact. People can lose their fear of death. Right? It can be that big. It can stop smoking or drinking, and all sorts of different things can have a profound effect because it is a profound experience. But it is an experience, but at the root of it is the reality that is not an experience. The veil has been torn back, and you experience love in all of its wholeness, with nothing other than love. And yeah, that transforms the heart. That is something you can't forget. But what do you have to do? Just like awakening or a mushroom trip or ayahuasca or a near-death experience or a Kundalini arising, you have to integrate it back into your life. It can't be about the peak experience. This is the bodhisattva trip rather than just the arhat. It now needs to turn into wisdom and understanding, not just another great experience. People become connoisseurs of these experiences. They want to have them all the time. I met a woman, in the last year she'd done like 62 or some plant medicine journeys. I go, wow, aren't you getting anything out of it? It becomes a quest, right? Which means it's another running away. We have to go from, okay, this experience, what is it? Many stop there. You need to go beyond. If you really want to go beyond to true non-dual, You go to understanding, wisdom, compassion. Now it's no longer just about me and my experience. It's about the nature of all things. That is the true Buddha path. And that's the one we open our hearts to. That's why it doesn't matter how huge and beautiful and wonderful the experience is, you let it go. You let it go. All right. Oh, that was really great. Now, how do I turn that into love? How do I become that? How do I integrate it, embrace it, abide there, embody it in everything? How do I be that rather than just experience that? That's actually what's symbolized in the chakra system. The sixth chakra, right, is you behold God, right? You see it all, right? It is the visionary. You see beyond all of this. You see the purity of love and divinity and all of it, right? Which is a step above the chakra of creation, where you're bringing things into creation. And yet there's a seventh chakra. There's a chakra that is beyond. What could possibly be beyond experiencing the reality of all being and pure love and emptiness? Well, what's beyond it is there's no more two. It's not you having an experience. You disappear. It's a complete dissolution. Extinction is what nirvana means. Enter nirvana, it means that the fuel of the flame has run out. And the flame simply puff. There's nothing left. There's no one and all. There's no everything and nothing. There are no more two. There's not two any longer. Bonsoir, bonsoir, Sèvres. Okay. Hope that's a good place to close, don't you think? But don't try to envision it. Don't try to seek that. Don't try. Right now, this moment, right here, this moment, right now. That's it. Where else are you going to find the eternal if it's not here? Where else are you going to find the infinite if not here? This moment is the Buddha moment. The septenary cipher T with G is revealed. At the end of the 7 T's. I am born 1980. Septenary cipher. Thanks, Stefan. Well, I guess it's not a place to end because there's a question. You're welcome, Eva. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Really enjoy listening to your answers. Thank you, Benji. Good to have you here. Robbie T, same to you, my friend. TG Coaching, what role do extreme opposites play in describing this? Well, without opposites, nothing can be described, can it? It's all just our facility for communicating. Opposites are for communicating. Opposites are for experiencing. No opposites, no experience. No existence, no creation. We have to realize that the opposites, each of the sides of the opposite, arises from that which is beyond all opposites. As Rumi put it, beyond all right doing and wrongdoing, there is a field of luminous consciousness. I will meet you there. And so, yeah, that is the dance of life. And as long as we realize that dance of life is the indivisible consciousness manifesting itself as form without ever becoming form, you are You are free. Thank you, guys. I was here too. There's Zante, building my tent. Ah, very good. Very good. Mary, David, Andy, TG, Robbie. Wonderful. Thank you, guys. So good to be with you all today. And look forward to seeing you all soon. Namaste.